In this video, we're going to talk about wisdom and how you might be able to use programming to become as arrogant as you possibly can and maybe deserve some of it. We touch lightly on my path of doing that while going through Hoon school and trying to dig really deep into the programming language and understand the very bedrock bottom there. I'm Ben Brown, or nordus-mocwyl. If you've been following the past few videos, I have a fund that was intended towards funding these Urbit videos. It is coming to a close, but the higher the number can be, the more I can give to my favorite charity, Give Directly. That's a fantastic way to end the year and encourage me for next year. Enjoy this video, and I hope you get a little wiser. Okay, bye. Good morning. We are in the holiday season, so merry holidays to you. A lot of times December is the best month in Texas, which is ironic because it's the shortest days, but I suppose it makes sense. Usually this time of year, I get sick. There's this pretty awful tension between I know that I am on a razor's edge of whether I get sick or not, and almost guaranteed I will get sick in December. Everybody and their dog wants to have a party between November and December, and at the same time, everybody's coughing and getting into small, warm rooms with the AC on. That also makes me feel at the beginning of the season. I like half have the mind that it's like, well, I should just bunker down through all of winter. But then I have the other half of my mind is like, a festival of lights in the middle of the darkest time of the year might be the only way that you really survive. The regular beating of the darkness seems to relentlessly come at you during this time of year. Maybe that's how you survive. I already went through my sickness, so I was laid out for a week, just in bed, waiting out life until I felt good enough to start seeing people again. But as soon as I did, the floodgates opened, and I went to several parties, which was fun, but also it doesn't take a lot to fill me up in the party department. Here we are. Christmas is around the corner, and it's exciting. This will be a little bit different, but kind of related to Urbit things. The overarching topic will be about wisdom, like a wisdom practice, how to build wisdom and what it is. In general, what I want to do is, in 2024, I learned a lot of things kind of in that realm. Building wisdom of going through ritual in a way, and I found a lot of help in that department this year in 2024. And here at the end of 2024, I don't really want to lose it, or I want to document that. I want to record it. So this episode is probably more like for me and for my own, you write something down because you don't want to lose it. And so this is what I want to do for some of these kind of transformative realizations and things that happened for me this year. I'm going to be pretty loose and just talky-talky. So yeah, overarching thing of wisdom. Then we'll dip into a little bit of programmer arrogance and even CrossFit. Now that I've said CrossFit, I did a little Brave search. And so this is like an response of like classic joke. How do you know if somebody goes to CrossFit? They'll tell you. Multiple sources say CrossFit is allowed to talk about it. So now I've crossed the threshold. But it's important. What is wisdom, and how the heck does all this tie together? I'm going to be pulling a lot from a man named John Vervaeke. John Vervaeke, Awakening from the Meaning Crisis. He is a cognitive scientist in Toronto University. This is a 50-episode, 50-hour series. It's been really helpful to me. It's daunting. It's a really large project. I've gone through these 50 videos, I think, 3 times. A lot of it's just really good, just like how we got to where we are historically, and then he kind of helps reclaim, I would say, like spirituality and transcendence, and most of all, the concept of wisdom, and kind of move past just like pure inert materialism that like the world is empty and pointless and meaningless and basically like nihilism stuff. Probably better than recommending listening to the series. At this point, it has been redone as a book, and that'd probably be the fastest, at least for the readers out there, the fastest way to catch up to what he's saying. He does a really good job in interviews and podcasts and stuff too. But he has his own like language, and it's not always the most accessible. I mentioned John Vervaeke because I'm going to basically steal from him, but I'm not going to be able to cite him for every single thing. He's basically the influencer. So wisdom, the basic idea of what you're trying to do is you want to see through illusion so that you can come into more contact with reality. Oh, hello. Get back here. You don't want to live a lie. Like there's certain ways that you can move about in the world where you can even be highly intelligent, capable of solving all kinds of problems, acing tests and things, but you can be incredibly foolish. The opposite of wisdom is foolishness. That's like hurting yourself, not understanding how what you did results into another consequence. You can get into a frame of mind, a frame of identity that prevents you from seeing a potential solution outside of your frame. You need to correct yourself. You need to break your frame, transcend yourself into a larger context, and be able to reframe situations, reframe yourself, and then you can piece together solutions. The idea is that there are illusions and traps, entrapments in the world that we get into just kind of moving forward. And like, how do you break out of that? Like, how do you break out of traps that you keep on falling into over and over? You're going to need to apply wisdom. Wisdom is about seeing through illusion to come into contact with reality. And right at this point, this framing of things, it doesn't entertain the idea of nihilism, that there's actually nothing out there. It doesn't entertain the idea of solipsism, that we're in the matrix and it's just a simulation. This is, yes, there is a reality. It's also sometimes called a contact epistemology. You want to engage with reality and you want it to change who you are to whatever reality is revealed to you. You want to be able to conform to it as much as you can so that you're not living in an illusion. You want to touch reality as much as you can. But what's really interesting about these words, like illusion and reality, is that they're actually comparative words. And this is a spectrum. Things are more or less illusory or more or less real. You say dreams, well, it was so scary at the time, I literally thought that you left me. That was an illusion. I woke up next to you today. That's reality. It's not to say that you arrive to reality, but you can always find what is more of an illusion to you and step towards reality and make progress into the reality direction. So it's comparative. It's much more like the word tall and small. It doesn't make sense to say something is just tall. Well, tall compared to what? I have a buddy, he's tall next to a giraffe. It's a comparison. Something is taller or smaller than something else. But in a vacuum, there is no understanding of these things. So if you say that's real, you're not actually pinpointing an absolute place. It's a relative statement. We'll hold off on programmer arrogance. Let's skip forward to CrossFit. In order to transcend yourself, you have to engage in a ritual. It's not enough to memorize a bunch of rules or beliefs. You can't just apply reason and logic to get yourself out of your current identity. You can't transcend yourself with that stuff. So it requires participation into like something that we would have disdainfully called a ritual before. But it's a scenario that allows you to transform. I have Tuvok up there because Star Trek explores all the time how absolute rigorous logic will actually hinder you in life and exploration and expanding yourself despite seeming inherently better than flawed humanity. This brings me to one of the great institutions of wisdom building, which is CrossFit, which is everybody's first thought when they think about building wisdom. It doesn't necessarily have to be CrossFit per se, but going to the gym. I'm just going to use CrossFit because this is one of the big things that happened to me in 2024. My closest neighbor is a CrossFit gym, and it just happens to be world class with some of the best coaches in the country. One of the crazy things about our gym is that they're totally orthodox. They do the actual posted workout by CrossFit. Let me paint the picture of what the ritual looks like. You walk up to the whiteboard, and it's going to have whatever exercise you're going to do that day. Complete as many rounds as possible for 12 minutes. Do 30 jump rope double unders, 10 burpees, 2 rings, 5 ring muscle ups. This is what you're going to be doing. Try to do this as many times as possible in the next 12 minutes. Jump ropes, burpees, and then try to do 5 muscle ups, which is a highly technical, very difficult thing to do. In this communal setting, you walk up and you're like, oh my gosh, this is ridiculous. I definitely can't do that. But the coach is going to walk through like, okay, cool. In order for everybody to suffer the same amount and be able to do this 12 minutes of effort, this is kind of an ideal. If you can achieve this, this is really impressive. But if you're not, if you're this guy over here or you're me, we're going to scale it down so that you can end up doing the same amount of effort as everybody else. In CrossFit, you're building like a virtue. So it's like to pull back some of these older ideas of a virtue. A virtue is when you have to take multiple good things and you find the right balance. So you're trying to find the right ratio between 2 totally good things. You have to like dynamically scale to the right place, and they're probably pulling on each other. Should you be totally nice or should you be totally kind? Well, you shouldn't be both of those. You should be just the right amount. You should be honest even if it's not the kindest thing, or you should be kind when maybe honesty isn't necessarily the highest thing. In CrossFit, I remember bringing this up where it's like, hey, I'm having a hard time. Whenever I walk up to the board, I don't know if I should be sucking it up, just go for the hard thing, or if I should be humble and be reverently scared of it. And one of the people that have been going for a long time was like, that's the whole point. That's the point of coming, is to bring those things together. It's the virtue between grit, or if all you have is grit, you're going to like harm yourself and others, but you're going to stick to it, versus, what would that be? Humility. This is what you're scaling in. And any given day, just literally going through the ritual, you are going to learn, okay, was I too humble or was I too ambitious? At the end of every workout, you end up finding out exactly where it was. So in the illusion reality concept, you're wondering, where is my brick wall? Like, when am I going to be running forward and smash my face into the wall? Because sometimes you look at the workout and you're like, there's just no way. And you end up scaling into more of the humble, let me take it easy today. And the illusion ends up being the brick wall, and you run right past the brick wall. Like it was just absolutely nothing. And you learn from that, oh, I have more in me. My limit is further. Some days you show up and you're feeling good. This should be my workout. I'm going to crush it. You end up hitting a brick wall before this one. And you just totally smash right into it. And then you just have to, oh gosh, I was wrong. I was wrong about my grit, my ambition. I should have been more humble. Either way, you're trying to find the illusion. The reality is your actual capital L limit. Through the practice, you actually get to participate and conform yourself to reality. The name of this reality is your actual capital L limit. What can you do? A lot of this year has been me going back and forth like, oh, wow, I thought way too high of myself. Okay, I'm more humble. Okay, oh, wow, I have a lot more in me to give. And then I move over to more of the arrogant side. And it's like, well, I thought that I could start doing that, but I really can't. And it's actually a constant move and a constant change. The fact that it's done in a set-aside time, in a set-aside place, with these roles of coach and trainees, the fact that you do it in the community, the fact that you are suffering and the person next to you is also suffering, something about being with other people actually pulls that limit discovery out of me. It's all the markings of a ritual. I think it's the most distilled and most visceral kind of religious ritual that I can think of. So yeah, CrossFit, the great institution of wisdom building that we all know about. You're trying to build the virtue of humility. I would actually call this whole thing humility. I suppose it's temperance. But humility is knowing exactly what you're capable of. You're not overconfident or underconfident. It's humility. One of the benefits is if the thing that you're most dreading in the day, like the hardest thing that you do, is a dumb, totally arbitrary workout that like doesn't make any sense and you would not do it by yourself, it makes the rest of your day way easier. If this 12 minutes is the thing you fear that day, everything else is going to be a pretty good day. That's been really good. Lots of benefits there. Maybe I'm really selling CrossFit, but I don't know, I'm super into it right now. But the process, this is something you got to participate in. It's a ritual. It helps me transcend myself. I couldn't know what my actual ability is at any given day without actually testing it out, without gaining the knowledge about it through participation, through action. And now that we've talked about humility, let's go through programmer arrogance. Arrogance. Maybe I'll need to prove that there is programmer arrogance first. If you haven't experienced it, a lot of it goes like this. You learn, oh, okay, you're a computer programmer. Oh, so you're going to solve the healthcare issues? You're going to write a program to do that? I met a guy that he's like, I want to get on committees to improve the civil engineering of the town. Well, you're not a civil engineer, you're a programmer. Why do you have such confidence that you being really good at programming is going to make you an authority when it comes to showing up to fix, I don't know, the government or something? Like, why would you even have that in your head? Why don't you have this concept that you're good in one domain, but not another? That's the arrogance part. That's definitely annoying. So programmer arrogance, if you've clocked it, you've clocked it. If you haven't, good on you. For the people who do recognize it, ironically, what's going on with that is actually some justified confidence. Where does that come from? What's the process there? When I discovered Urbit, I actually ended up learning my first real programming language in Hoon. Went to Hoon school and started to learn these things. And it was the first time I was like, oh, I'm starting to understand the computer. And through that process of learning how to program, I found that it was a very similar wisdom practice. It was something that helped me identify mistakes in my own thinking, my own understanding, and transcend those things into self-correct. When you're programming along, when you first learn it, you're going to learn, okay, well, this thing does this thing, and this thing does this thing, and this is how the system works. And you're not going to totally understand it, but you're like, okay, well, let me test this out. And you're going to write up a couple things. And then what you're going to do is like, okay, well, this is the program. This should work. And then you run it, send it through the computer to see what the result is. And you're going to get a big ol' nope, that's not how that works. And it's going to tell you what it sees is wrong with what you did. And you're like, okay, I guess I didn't understand this. And so you try it again. And you're like, well, that makes sense. I was wrong about that. And you run it again. And you get a good old, this is what's wrong with it. And you're like, oh, shoot. Oh, I forgot this thing over here. Let me run it again. This is what's wrong. And you're like, oh, I didn't understand this at all. You have to clear it out. And then finally, you run it and you get a boop, and it runs the whole thing. And you're like, oh, this process, when you're wrong, there was an illusion in your mind about how things worked. How does the computer work? How does the programming language work? How do I get this thing to be correct? Whenever you write the program and then run it, you are bringing it into something that is more real. If you're wrong, there was some illusion that you need to correct in your understanding of any of the things that you're trying to do. If you get it to build, that's more real. If you get the correct answer, the whole nother process there, if you can actually achieve what you want, that's even more real. This is a wisdom practice. This is a ritual you can go through either by yourself or with other people, where you get this rapid feedback loop where you can continually improve your understanding and correct yourself. You probably will need help if you end up having the same errors over and over. I think this is better when done with other people, which is something I'm guilty of. I should be doing that more. This is a wisdom building process. In particular, you're going to be building up your understanding of logic and reasoning, numeracy as well as an understanding of how your computer works. How does that build up into arrogance? Through this process, you're building up correctness, a way of thinking that can get you to a real answer at the end of it. And I'd say, like, in particular, in our world, knowing all of these things, like how your computer works, having robust logic, and then just numeracy in a way where you're not just doing math problems, but you're using the numbers to achieve what you want to. In a modern context, we value logic above kind of anything else. Back to Mr. Vulcan, by default, our culture is like, well, this is all that there is in the world, even though it can't help you with wisdom. It affects how you think. It transforms. I'm still going through the process. I can feel my brain changing towards something even more real. Understanding numbers and how the computer works ends up putting you on the top of the stack of a lot of folks. A lot of the ways that our world wants to solve its problems through a more modern, enlightened scientific method process, it legitimately does raise you to a level where a little bit of arrogance is actually called for, where it might actually be humble to see yourself as more capable because you have refined these skills through trial and error, feedback, and actually attempting to take something you've written and push it into a reality. And that constant self-improvement, that removal of the chaff to actually get to what you should be thinking about. It is a ritual that does help you self-transcend, improve your thinking. And it's funny because I wouldn't necessarily call the programmers wise. It feels like there is a missing element. I would say it's like a wisdom practice that doesn't necessarily give wisdom. Like, it's not like the result is wisdom. The result is high skills in these categories. Let's return to wisdom, and we'll see it from a slightly different angle. This is like a David Deutsch thing, but like, problems are inevitable. Life is basically an endless string of problems. But like David Deutsch talks about, problems are soluble. The thing that you use to solve problems is intelligence. So to turn your problem into a solution, you apply your intelligence. But here's the thing, there's more than one way to solve a problem. What if your approach for solving the problem is incorrect? What if the way that you want to approach the CrossFit workout is by taking on exactly as written, even though you're not capable of doing any of it? Well, you're going to spend 12 minutes trying to get the 30 double under jump ropes. You're going to need to do something else. You're going to need to tweak how you apply your intelligence. That is called rationality. Rationality is distinct from logic and reason because rationality is knowing what proportions to apply. Whenever you're going to solve a problem, there's going to be a whole bunch of different paths you could take to solve the problem. All of these could come up with solutions. But which paths towards solving the problem is a better one? Well, you're going to need to weigh it, do the right ratio thing. You're going to need to find the balance between all the good things that you want to find the right ratio, the right like virtue building thing. Like, you want to find the ratio so that you can ultimately find the solution that ends up with a solution that you think is right. The thing is, with rationality, what are you deciding is good and how are you balancing them together? Well, you have to take another step outside of rationality where you consider your rationality from a distance. In that scrutinizing of rationality, is it a speech bubble coming from glasses? This like scrutiny of rationality, like, how am I deciding to change the way that I solve problems? Like, what is the criteria I'm using to change my intelligence? That is wisdom. There we go. Wisdom requires stepping outside of yourself. And this is why the glasses are actually an excellent example. I don't see my glasses. This is straight from John Vervaeke. I don't see my glasses. I see through my glasses. It's a tool that allows me to see through my beautiful circle window here. How do I know if there's like a smudge or a crack in my glasses? How do I know if they're leading me astray? I have to take them off and I have to examine them from the outside. And then totally, I actually do have a little smudge there. Okay, I think I fixed my tool. Well, how do I make sure? You got to put it back on. You have to take that perspective. You have to apply that tool. We do this with everything. And we do that with mental things. We do that with our language. We do that with a programming language. Like, I'm going to think of a solution in the programming language, write it down as a text file, send it through, like, will it actually work and build, and then see what the result is. This is building up wisdom. These are the practices that can attribute to potentially arrogance. But it's also going to be the way that you would transcend your arrogance. Well, yes, in the culture, I currently have an elevated level of logic and reasoning. I know how the computers work that are controlling our lives, and I have a greater affinity for numbers and understanding what's happening with them. Perhaps when I'm applying those things to solve my problems, I actually need to reevaluate my rationality of, well, not all problems can be solved with logic and numbers. And so you're going to have to engage in a different wisdom practice. Like, doing this programming is not going to build the virtue between suck it up and humility. It works on something else. Let's take the next 20 minutes. This probably just ended up being just a long video. That's okay. I just wanted to get these things down. Thanks for letting me talk through this. Let me share my story about wisdom that I gained through Hoon School. And again, this is my first real programming language. I was doing a little bit with creating websites that gave me some basic ideas of, like, I would say that's like, it's almost more like encoding, where it's like, oh, if you do HTML, header 1, and p tag, then you get these things over in the browser. To me, that's more of like encoding something so it gets decoded in another way. A programming language like Hoon is much more of a universal thing. So if you want motivation for programming, this is something, again, from the good David Deutsch. If you can't program it, you don't know it. This idea was popularized by the physicist David Deutsch. You don't know it if you can't program it. That's a better way of putting it. This statement, it's a really, like, profound thing. It's very much like a wisdom practice to, like, check. Do you understand this basic thing? If you can't make a program out of it, you don't get it. Programming becomes the playground that you use to test your knowledge. It goes back to the programmer arrogance, right? If you have a clear goal, you program it, and you go through the process of being wrong until you're right, you will actually have built knowledge. This is an important thing to know. One, computers can simulate anything. And hell, because I'm trying to preserve what I learned in 2024. Alan Kay, one of the great guys from Xerox PARC, has pinpointed that computers do simulation. You can simulate anything with a computer. In fact, he sees it as a medium that can be any medium you want it to be. There's the newspaper medium, the TV medium, or the paper medium. Any of these mediums can be recreated in the computer, simulated in the computer. So you can simulate anything that you would want in the computer, including reality itself. While it can't be totally captured by computer simulation, you can remove the illusion and get closer and closer to reality. Personally, I believe the nature of reality is infinite, and so you can't actually capture it all, but you can get closer, you can make progress towards it. Computers are capable of simulating anything and everything. You can program it. You'll probably have to reduce it down to a model of something and then program it. The idea of you don't know it if you can't program it is actually quite expansive whenever you think of you can represent anything in any full computer. You can represent anything in just zeros and ones, like zeros and ones. If you can manipulate these things and change it, then like you have a computer and you can represent anything using those things. Or, you can be awesome and like there's people who've created computers using Magic the Gathering rules. So you could end up simulating the world through Magic the Gathering cards, like through its computation. It just might not be as fast, but possible. So Alan Kay, computers simulate anything. Any piece of reality you want to simulate, you can do it. And if you can program it, you know it. But what an awesome way of determining whether you know something or not. It feels like that should be the end test of anything that you learn in school. Can you program it? I have some other asides there. The things that we don't know in the universe are, we don't know consciousness. We can't program consciousness yet. We got pretty far with an intelligence device that can solve some problems, like what's probably going to happen next. It only knows that because we trained it through probabilistic words, but it only has gotten to the intelligence and problem solving part through probabilistic thinking. It doesn't care about how it solves problems. It's not rational. That's my statement of AI and kind of John Vervaeke's statement. My example of what I know that I know and wanted to test early on in the Urbit world is there's this amazing lecture from Richard Feynman. A special message from Ralph Layton, but it's Feynman, Feynman lectures. So it's about like an 11-minute read. This was a lecture that got recorded as a document, and it is Richard Feynman going through how to do math. It just starts with counting and quickly goes to multiplication and logs and powers, and eventually gets into the complications of irrational numbers and how do you represent really large numbers. It's a quick read, but it's something that I butted my head up against. From reading this, I knew how addition and multiplication worked. And it didn't come from times tables where it's like, well, I just know what 9 times 9 is. It's like, no, I get how addition turns into multiplication. And in order to know that, I knew that. I wanted to dive deep into some of the hoon that makes that happen. I take something that I thought I was pretty confident that I knew, multiplication in the standard library. It's mul here. So if you wanted to apply mul, you do the brackets. This is a hungry function. I'm going to multiply 4 and 2 and get 8. All right. What's happening under the hood? Like, yeah, I know 9 times 9 is 81, but like, how do you program it? And this is the answer. It could be useful to try to do this yourself. So this is what the docs say is the library. So mul. This is the name you're going to use to call this hungry function. This right here, this is a label for a jet. A jet is another concept. If I can get through it, we'll find out why. But the Urbit language can be very, very slow. If you do something like multiplication and you do it exactly as Urbit defines it to be done, it will take a very, very long time. And there are faster ways to get the exact same result. Jets can be registered to say, hey, we know that we'll get the same result if we take the fast route versus taking the really slow route. So whenever they write the binary that turns the Urbit program into what the computer runs, they can add these labels. So it's like, if you see this label, you can run this thing because this is equivalent to what's being asked. And it can be a lot faster. That's called a jet. In this case, the jet label is this parentheses sign mul, sin mul. Yeah, and then what you're going to do is you're going to be passing in 2 things. The first number will be called A, the second number will be called B. 4 is A, 2 is B, right? And so then we're going to be bouncing through here. This ket hep tells you what kind of thing comes out, which is just going to be a standard atom. And an atom is just a positive integer. So 4 and 2 fit that, -2 doesn't. This is adding a new thing called C, and it's starting at 0. And this is going to be like a counter. We haven't got into all this stuff, but this is a loop. This explains, like we call it a trap in hoon, but it's going to be a place that you're going to take in all these variables like A, B, and C. These are understood inside of mul, inside of this multiply function. Now that they're defined inside the trap, you can run through what's inside the trap and modify those things here. That's what's happening on this line. A and C are being modified. Then you return to where the trap starts, where the loop starts. Once you satisfy this exit condition, so you have 2 different branches. One is you've come up with a solution and we're going to spit it out. In this case, the scenario is, this is testing equality. If 0 is the same as A, or if A is the same as 0, then you're going to take this branch, which is to say you're going to output C. C is going to end up being an atom, and then that's what comes out. So in the case of 4 and 2, C is 8, And 8 is the result that comes out because that ends up being the branch that you take when you find out that A is 0. Well, how do we get to A is 0? When you get to there, this is where the loop will continue to happen, and it'll continue to modify by decreasing decrement. This is like subtract by 1. Decrement A, subtract it by 1, and like boop. So you take 4, decrement it to 3, and now A went from 4 to 3. And then we're going to go back to the top of the loop. At the exact same time, we're going to add B to C. So you basically take that 2, add to C. Okay, great. And then we start back at the loop. We check which branch are we going to take. Well, A is not 0, it's 3. We're going to decrement A from 3 to 2. Cool. And then we're going to add B again to C. So now C is at 4, right? We have the loop. Cool, let's check. Is A 0? No, it's 2. Cool, we'll go in and modify A to 1. Take C, modify it to add 2 again to it. Boom, C is at 6. And then we go back over to the loop. Is A at 0? Nope, it's at 1. Let's decrement A to 0. And then now C, we add that 2 again. Now we're at 8. We start at the top. Check, which branch are we going to take? Well, is A 0? Yes. Okay, cool, we'll spit out 8. That's the answer. And that's multiplication. It's like adding in multiple layers at a time. So that makes sense. One of the questions would be, does add make sense? Let's see if we can get to the bottom of all these. We have this equality thing that we're not sure how it got, and decrement and add. Let's investigate these. Add, if we take a look at it, well, add's interesting. We have the same thing. We have the jet registration. Add's going to take in 2 things. It's going to spit out an atom. It also has a branch. If A is 0, then spit out B. Okay, cool. This isn't a trap, but we are going to modify the names, the variables. We're going to modify A and B here. A is going to get the same reduced by 1 treatment, and B is actually going to get the add 1 treatment. So in this sense, we have a stack of 2 numbers. Let's just see it. If we have a stack of 4 things and a stack of 2 things, let's just say A is equal to that. B is equal to that. And so when we dec A and we add B, we're basically saying addition is removing this and we're adding it here. And we got to run it again, removing this, adding it here, removing this, adding it here. Once A is 0, you spit out B. 6. That's what we see here. I just don't know if that's what it looks like in the Hoon library. So let's use Cliff. I like Cliff. Base, we'll go to system. This is where Hoon is defined in hoon.hoon, system hoon.hoon. This is the Hoon language. Here, look at that. We have the math section, and there's add. Add, we got A and B. If A is 0, B. If not, decrement A and increase B by 1. I guess it's adequate to just have this. Well, I don't know everything. Look at me getting wiser every day. I have to understand that later on. But let's focus again on these 2 things that don't make any sense. I could follow up with what dec is. Add kind of ended up at this plus lus parentheses and this tis parentheses thing. And when I get to decrement, decrement is nice because it's not asking to go to any more of these other named functions. It's only doing this lus thing. Decrement is actually a really interesting one, but we won't go over it because of time. But yeah, this is a plus. This is an increment. This is added by 1, and it's incrementing it up. Where does that come from? And similarly, we have this A is equal to 0. Like, where does that come from? There's this weird syntax of this and this. And maybe that should just be a cliffhanger. I have more to talk about on this topic, but this comes from because this might not be the next topic, or it might be a whole nother year. This stuff isn't named in the standard library. This is directly from Nock. And Nock is the computer code, the assembly language. It's what the computer uses to determine what it should be doing. You as a human don't want to write in Nock, but it uses direct codes. This direct code is increment, and this is check equality. With increment, as we learn in the Feynman lectures, and if you do the exercise of understanding how decrement works, you can actually do all arithmetic with just increment. That's all you need to do math is increment. And check equality. This is a very reduced idea of what you have to do with math. I think we're gonna have to get into that later, but it's important to say, so this is knock. This is knock 4K. In here, we can actually see, boom, there's our increment. This plus A is going to be equivalent to adding 1 to A. And in a similar way, this is check equality. So if whatever number A is the exact same as A, so if like 0 is 0, then you come out with this is true. 0 ends up being true. If you check equality and A is different, this first slot is different from the second slot, then you get a false. This stuff is what is being invoked as we search down multiplication, down into addition, and then even decrement. This is like the bedrock of those things, and it comes from knock. That can be the next video. I do need to really go. When we get there, we can talk about that. But there you go. That's wisdom. So that's a little bit of my 2024 journey and something that I wanted to save and have. And things that I learned about wisdom and how I can build it through these different rituals, like working out and being a total nerd, has been really helpful. There's probably other wisdom practices to engage in to keep on building a personality and becoming a more robust human being, but this was a big deal for me, 2024. Thanks for listening. Happy holidays. Bye.